ago.
Do you oppose NATO membership for Ukraine?
I don't think it's practical to have it, personally. I know that our new Secretary of Defense, who's excellent, Pete, made a statement today saying that he thinks it's unlikely or impractical. I think probably that's true. I think long before President Putin, they said there's no way they'd allow that. This has been going on for many, many years. They've been saying that for a long time, that Ukraine cannot go into NATO. And I'm okay with that. I just want the war, whether they are or they're not. But it certainly would seem to be that most people have said that that is something that's...
Donald Trump has officially accepted that Ukraine joining NATO is unlikely and impractical, and he accepts it. However, in a bid to go far and beyond, Keir Starmer has said that Ukraine is on an irreversible path to NATO. In other words, Starmer has revealed he doesn't accept Donald Trump's stance on Ukraine, and that's where things seem to get worse. That's because Starmer has already done enough to create an air of hostility with Trump. He and his party said the worst thing about him, calling him a racist, sad little man, misogynist, neo-Nazi sympathizing sociopath, and threat to international order. Even though Donald Trump could forget this, he now cannot simply ignore Starmer openly defying him. This is scaring leaders in the UK who fear that the growing hostility between Starmer and Trump will lead to weak relations between the US and the UK. But what more is Keir Starmer doing, and what he actually plans to do, that is attracting anger from Trump, making Starmer's political survival difficult? In this video, let's know about the whole story. Donald Trump is not known for forgiveness, but for his grudges, his retaliations, and his iron-fisted control over global alliances. And right now, Keir Starmer is playing a very dangerous game, one that could lead to the most severe diplomatic fallout between the US and UK in decades. When Trump first returned to power, he was remarkably willing to overlook Starmer's past criticisms. He could have held a grudge. After all, Starmer and the Labour Party had openly ridiculed him, denounced his policies, and aligned themselves with his political adversaries. However, Trump, known as the dealmaker, chose to extend an olive branch. He invited Starmer to his home and held a discussion while giving the impression that he had to be nice to Starmer, hiding what he truly thought about him.
Voting Keir Starmer, the UK Premier.
Yes, he's coming tonight.
What do you think of him? Some of his colleagues in government are quite critical of you.
Well, I'm going to see him in about an hour, so I have to be nice, right? But I actually think he's very nice. I think he ran a great race. He did very well. It's very early, but he's popular, and I'll be seeing him, and I'll send you a...
Yet Starmer, rather than leveraging this opportunity to strengthen UK-US ties, chose to antagonize Trump where it hurts most, and that is Ukraine and NATO policy. And now Trump is fuming. For decades, the UK has carefully maintained its position as America's closest ally, managing through shifting administrations and geopolitical changes. But Keir Starmer is now walking a dangerous tightrope, one that threatens to fracture the special relationship between London and Washington. At the heart of this brewing conflict is Starmer's decision to go against Trump's foreign policy on Ukraine. While Trump is preparing for negotiations with Russia, potentially conceding Ukraine's NATO membership, Starmer has doubled down, insisting that Ukraine is on an irreversible path to joining the alliance. This isn't just a disagreement. This is a direct challenge to Trump's foreign policy doctrine, one that he will not ignore.
On that? Well, my position is the NATO position. This was discussed at the summit that we had last year in Washington, where it was agreed amongst all NATO members that there should be an irreversible path for Ukraine to NATO membership.
And you have backed away from that, to be absolutely clear.
No, obviously nobody was expecting that to be...
Secretary of Defense, who's excellent, Pete, made a statement today saying that he thinks it's unlikely or impractical. I think probably that's true. I think long before President Putin, they said there's no way they'd allow that. This has been going on for many, many years. They've been saying that for a long time, that Ukraine cannot go into NATO. And I'm okay with that. I just want the war, whether they are or they're not. But it certainly would seem to be that most people have said that that is... What?
Do you view Ukraine as an equal member of this peace process?
It's an interesting question. I think they have to make peace. Their people are being killed, and I think they have to make peace. I said that was not a good war to go into, and I think they have to make peace. That's what I...
Keir Starmer is facing a diplomatic reality he refuses to accept. Donald Trump is fundamentally reshaping U.S. foreign policy in ways that directly contradict the UK's position on Ukraine and NATO. Unlike his predecessor, Joe Biden, who took a hardline stance against Russia and strongly backed Ukraine's NATO aspirations, Trump's approach is centered on de-escalation, negotiation, and reducing U.S. commitments in Europe. Trump's stance is not just a minor policy shift. It is a strategic realignment that aims to redefine NATO's role and limit America's involvement in foreign conflicts. Since returning to power, Trump has outlined 3 core goals that have sent shockwaves through Western capitals. First, he intends to end the war in Ukraine, even if that means forcing Kyiv to make territorial concessions. Trump has openly criticized Biden's approach to Ukraine, arguing that the promise of NATO membership and increased military aid escalated tensions and prolonged the war. Second, he wants to reduce U.S. financial and military commitments to NATO, believing that the alliance has become a financial burden for the United States while allowing European countries to underfund their own defenses.
The fact that, we've given them, in my opinion, $350 billion. That's what the real number is. You don't hear that number. And Europe has given, in my opinion, $100 billion. And they've done it in the form of a loan. And I have a Secretary of Treasury right now who's actually quite brave. He's over in Ukraine on a train. And there's a lot of things happening around that train that aren't so good. And he's going there to get a document done where we're going to be assured that we're going to, in some form, get this money back, because we're putting up far more money than Europe, and Europe is in far more danger than we are. We have an ocean in between. Europe has nothing in between. You know what they have in between? They have Ukraine in between. So wait a minute. So, as you know, Europe is putting up money, and they're getting it in the form of a loan. And the United States under Biden didn't do loans. They just handed money every time somebody walked in from Ukraine. They just handed them money foolishly. This should have never happened. It should have never started. And once it did, other things should have happened. Other things should have taken place.
And then Trump wants to shift the burden of European security to European nations, making it clear that the U.S. will no longer act as Europe's default military protector. Despite this clear shift in U.S. policy, Starmer is choosing to openly oppose Trump rather than adapt to the changing geopolitical landscape. His continued insistence on Ukraine's membership and his push for a stronger European role in NATO are direct challenges to Trump's vision. This is not merely a disagreement over Ukraine's future. It is a power struggle over who controls NATO, who sets the alliance's priorities, and who dictates the broader Western agenda. In this respect, Trump has repeatedly blamed NATO's eastward expansion for triggering Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He believes that the Biden administration and European leaders made a grave strategic miscalculation by discussing Ukraine's potential NATO membership openly, which, in his view, provoked Moscow into launching the invasion in 2022.
And in regards to Ukraine as well, yesterday you mentioned that you thought Ukraine's NATO aspirations were one of the main reasons that the war broke out. Who do you blame for the war, Ukraine or Russia?
Well, I think that there were a lot of people to blame. All I can say is very simply, if I were president, that war would never have happened. And you know what else wouldn't have happened? The Middle East wouldn't be all blown up, and October 7th wouldn't have happened either. Those two areas, you wouldn't have inflation, you wouldn't have October 7th, you wouldn't have Russia and Ukraine fighting. None of those things would have happened if I were president.
According to Trump, Ukraine was given false hope, creating a dangerous situation where NATO appeared to be extending its influence directly into Russia's sphere of interest. Trump argues that the United States should not be making security commitments that unnecessarily escalate conflicts, particularly when those commitments do not serve direct American interests. Starmer, however, has taken the opposite stance. He has reaffirmed the UK's support for Ukraine's irreversible path to NATO membership, outright rejecting the notion that NATO expansion was a mistake. By doing so, he is not only opposing Trump's argument, but also reinforcing Ukraine's belief that full NATO integration is inevitable. This refusal to Trump's position creates an immediate conflict between the UK and the US. If Trump is determined to block Ukraine's NATO membership as part of a broader peace deal, Starmer's insistence on pushing forward with NATO expansion will be seen as a direct act of defiance. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, Please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel for more exclusive videos on the groundbreaking changes happening in British politics. Let's continue now. Trump has made it clear that he intends to negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine, even if that means pressuring Kyiv into making territorial concessions. His priority is not Ukrainian sovereignty, but rather securing a deal that ends the war quickly, allowing the U.S. to shift its resources away from Europe and towards domestic priorities, including economic recovery and border security. Trump sees no long-term strategic benefit in prolonging the war, especially when continued military aid to Ukraine drains American resources and risks direct confrontation with Russia.
I think Zelensky is maybe the greatest salesman of any politician that's ever lived. Every time he comes to our country, he walks away with $60 billion. And I like him, you know, on the impeachment hoax #1, he was very good. He said, no, the president didn't threaten me at all. He could have been a grandstander and said, I was threatened, right, Matt? He could have said, I was threatened. So I like him. But he's the greatest.
So I like him. But he's a Starmer, however, has positioned himself as a roadblock to Trump's peace ambitions. The UK has declared that there can be no negotiations about Ukraine without Ukraine, effectively rejecting any deal that does not fully align with Zelensky's demands. Starmer has doubled down on supporting Ukraine's military ambitions, including NATO membership, additional aid and security guarantees. By publicly reaffirming support for Ukraine's NATO bid, Starmer is raising Kyiv's expectations, making it harder for Zelensky to accept a negotiated peace. Trump sees this as deliberate interference in his diplomatic efforts. If Ukraine is convinced that NATO membership remains a real possibility, it will be less willing to make the concessions Trump believes are necessary to end the war. This puts the UK in direct opposition to Trump's peace strategy, a position that could lead to serious diplomatic and economic consequences for Britain. Even though Trump earlier was ready to forget what Starmer and the Labour Party said about him, he could no longer ignore the open confrontation. All the derogatory remarks said about him were before Trump's presidency, and Trump can understand the rhetoric behind them. However, opposing Trump's policies now means an intentional willingness to challenge Trump, and this will trigger a severe reaction. That's because Trump is actively working on a peace deal for Ukraine that could reshape the global balance of power. His approach is drastically different from Biden's, as it focuses on direct negotiations with Vladimir Putin, reducing U.S. military commitments to Ukraine, and disregarding European objections. Trump sees himself as the ultimate dealmaker, and he intends to end the war on his terms.
But President Putin wants to have peace now, and that's good. And he didn't want to have peace with Biden. And you tell me why that is, okay?
By reaffirming Ukraine's NATO bid, Starmer is giving Kyiv false hope, making it harder for Zelensky to accept a compromise. By siding with European leaders who oppose Trump's negotiations, Starmer is encouraging resistance to the peace process, fueling divisions within NATO. By rejecting any settlement that does not include Ukraine's NATO membership, Starmer is actively working against Trump's diplomatic strategy. If Trump sees Starmer as an obstacle to his peace plan, he will move aggressively to sideline the UK in diplomatic affairs. Trump is not known for patience, and if he believes Starmer is interfering with his ability to deliver a Ukraine peace deal, he will take swift and decisive action. Already, Trump has made clear that the EU and the UK will not be a part of the peace process. By doing so, he has ended any possibility of anyone sabotaging the deal to end the Ukraine war. However, if he felt Starmer was going way out of line, punishing him wouldn't be difficult for Trump. This will be done to give a warning, after which harsher actions will be taken. You should know that Trump has a long history of retaliating against leaders who oppose him. Angela Merkel faced threats of U.S. troop withdrawals when she criticized Trump's NATO stance. Justin Trudeau saw U.S. tariffs imposed on Canadian exports after making a mild diplomatic challenge. Emmanuel Macron was sidelined in global diplomacy after suggesting Europe should have an independent defense policy. Now Starmer is making the same mistake. If Trump sees Starmer as an adversary, he will not hesitate to retaliate. Whether through trade tariffs, military downgrades, or diplomatic isolation, Trump has the power to make the UK pay a heavy price. Starmer may believe he is taking a principled stand on Ukraine, but in reality, he is walking into a confrontation that Britain cannot afford. Now, Starmer has realized he made a mistake by committing to the policy on Ukraine set under Biden. And now, he fears retaliation. Why is Keir Starmer, in your opinion, trying to defy Trump on major policies? Is it to prove that he is strong and can make decisions that might be against the United States? In the comments section right below, share your thoughts on whether opposing the US on major world matters will earn Starmer Trump's respect or anger, which will be followed by punishments. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to get more updates on British politics and how events are changing it. Until the next video, stay tuned.
The position that Trump is going to be taking in relation to us generally. So Brexit is now going to turn out to be a tremendous asset. Because what is he going to say? He's going to say, I like those little guys. I've always rather liked the UK. I've got a little few investments in there. I'm going to give them a trade bounce. I'm going to do some kind of trade deal with them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to impose 20% trade tariffs on the EU, who I don't like. And where is our old friend Starmer going to be on that? At one stage, he'll be smiling, thank you so much, and the other realizing that he is going to be dancing to Trump's tune for the next 4 years. This is going to be the greatest thing I have ever seen, watching socialists having to deal with somebody of the right and having to bow at the knee to them as they have done to the BLM.